This week we are starting a new series, but before we kick off into that series, I want to touch base on a couple things church related here. First being that as we continue to grow, which is a great thing, is a wonderful thing, we can't be the church that we were 3 years ago. In a couple weeks, we're going to be celebrating 3 years of one church, which is amazing, and all of that. And there's just different parts that we tweak and have to change. And one of those is our kids area, which is a wonderful thing because we have lots of kids, right? Like, I'm not complaining. I love that. But in that process, as the kids have grown and we've gotten more kids, and as we continue to grow in that, I want you to help us as parents and help us with this transition time. We now have the warehouse. We have Andrea working with kids, doing a Bible lesson. It's wonderful. We're trying our best to keep the kids over there during that time because it's difficult to go back and forth when we have kids that she's teaching a lesson, trying to show them stuff. So if we can to help with that, but also at the beginning, for if you have a preschooler, we have a sign-in, sign-out sheet there. And at the end, if you're willing as parents to go over there and get your kids and touch base with Andrea so she knows we're giving the kids back to the right parents. And we're going to continue to transition. That's a good thing, right? Like, I don't know. There's some weeks that I would rather take somebody else's kids, but I get it. But if we can go over there and rather than just kind of wait and see if you end up with your kid, if you don't mind as parents, go over there and touch base with Andrea or one of the volunteers to help with that. We can do that. So Brian's up here because this is one of the weekends that I really wanted to do a tag team sermon, and I'm bacheloring it this weekend. I know, feel bad for me. I've had lots of frozen pizzas. I've lived off of Doritos. I found a secret stash.
You only know how to cook frozen pizza?
I know how to do more, but it's just something about being a bachelor to do like that. So Jamie and the kids are all down their softball tournament at Cedar Point, so they're on all sorts of rides and all this stuff. But with that and getting over being sick, I asked Brian to kind of tag team our first week of this new series of being the unsung hero. So Brian, let's start off with, what is a hero? I'm going to let you go first. What is a hero to you?
Well, I got to think that there's the obvious answer, right? There's
Me?
Superman. Well,
Me,
that wasn't what first came to mind, but Superman, Batman. I was talking to Lucas at breakfast this morning. He talked about the Mandalorian, right, as a hero. But there's lots of examples of hero, right? There's billion-dollar franchises that Marvel has, all built on heroes, right?
Yeah, and for me, my brain goes to Clementine Paddleworth. I wish I made up that name.
Who is Clementine?
She was in 1936 a writer for the New York Times, and she was a food review critic, and she went to sit at a restaurant, and they brought out a giant sub sandwich to her, and that is how we get the name the Hero Sandwich, because she said only a superhero could eat that entire thing. So that's how we get the name Hero, and I feel like that's my superpower. I could eat that entire sandwich.
Eating is your superpower, even though you can only cook frozen pizzas.
I can go to Jersey Mike's just as easy as I can. So, and I can eat.
You on a first name basis with Mike, with Jersey Mike?
I may know the owners.
There you go.
I wonder if Jack will give me a free sub now that I mentioned Jersey Mike's.
Free advertising.
Free advertisements at
millions
one
of viewers out here on
Jerry,
Facebook.
let your brother know he owes me some free subs for pushing Jersey Mike's this week at church. But right, like that's the entire thing we're talking about is the hero part. Like, our minds go to different things. I was joking. Clementine Paddleworth is not. Did I say that right? Paddleworth, yes, was not really my hero because she named it a hero. Superman, stuff like that. We have those, but we're really leaning into in this series is the unsung heroes. And my hope as we go through this is sharing with people in the Bible and also people in real life that have shared their faith in a very unique way, a way that maybe we don't always think of. And in the end, we look back and we're like, wow, they really were the hero in that situation. They really were the person that you may not think of. We can think of those even in the Bible, those big characters, like Paul or, obviously Jesus, right? Like those big characters as a hero, but there's so many lesser known people in the Bible, and that's some of the stuff we're going to discuss here.
Yeah, so you're more of a Bible scholar than me, John, but we were coming through thinking through some of those unsung heroes, right? That might be here. Barnabas is in Acts, right? He sold his field gave money to the apostles that were in need. Phoebe in Romans, Rahab, and Jethro, right? Those are all kind of unsung heroes, but you came up with one that,
well, let's be honest. I knew that Jamie was not here this week, so I could get away with doing it, and this is the only week I probably could, is the unsung hero of Ehud.
Ehud. He's so unsung that we even had to look up on Facebook how to pronounce
his name. Because Ehud, and let's be honest, how many people before I just mentioned the name knew who Ehud was? Okay, I got one. Yep, that sounds about right. Ehud, when you
Gabe, of course, is the one who knows.
Yeah, when you go into his story and you actually hear what was going on, it's kind of an amazing story. Do you want to share a little bit of Ehud's story with us?
Yeah. So Ehud, and it's quite appropriate that Gabe knows about Ehud, right? Is that he was. We'll talk a little bit about the verse here in just a moment, but he was one of the judges, right? And so we were reading a little bit earlier and talking this morning about the purpose of judges, and they came in anytime Israel kind of lost their way, right?
So the book of Judges is back and forth. If you ever read the book of Judges, it goes back and forth. The entire scenario, I can make it short for you, is everything was going really, really well. They were worshiping God. The king, the person in charge, was worshiping God, and then they started to go, let's stop worshiping God so much. Maybe we start to slip a little. Maybe we don't come as often. Maybe we don't do those things.
And then something bad happened.
And then something bad happens. And the entire world falls apart, and they get taken over by another, evil people, and they're enslaved, and all this happens, and then they reconcile with God and say, wow, God, we really, really messed up. Let's try this again. We can do this. Let's get a new king. Let's get a new power. Let's do this. And then the same thing just happens. And it's this vicious cycle.
How many times did that happen? A lot.
A lot, right? Like the entire book is just listed of person after person after person that this happens to. And it almost becomes comical now that you read it, where you're like, how did they not pick up on that this was going to happen again? Because it keeps happening over and over again. And Ehud is kind of our unsung hero in this, that he has some amazing traits that are lesser known. One being that Ehud is left-handed. And that becomes a big deal. But at the time, you were kind of looking at Ehud as, he's not a good guy. Like being left-handed, that's weird, that's awkward, that's whatever. He doesn't look like the hero that's going to be our hero, because he's left-handed. That's strange, that's different. And people aren't really seeing this. So
let's hear a little bit about what it says in the Bible about Ehud. So Judges 3:20 through 21. So Ehud walked over to Eglon, who was sitting alone in a cool upstairs room. And Ehud said, I have a message from God for you. As King Eglon rose from his seat, Ehud reached out with his left hand, pulled out the dagger, strapped to his right thigh, and plunged it into the king's belly.
And now you're going to understand why Jamie would not let me do this sermon, so I'm picking Brian to talk to me about it with this week. Okay, so Ehud, right? He sits there. One, he's left-handed. The cool place that they talk about.
Where was he, John?
The bathroom. That's really what it was, okay? So it's not, I'm sure if you've ever heard the story before, it was viewed as like, oh, he was in the temple palace. No, he was in the bathroom. And what happened was Ehud tricked Eglon into wanting to talk to him. And he said, I have a secret for you. I have a secret. Come, and he's using this mystery of this entire part to get him to be alone, because Eglon really wanted this knowledge, really wanted this, like he was one of those guys that just couldn't, you all know who I'm talking about, right? They wanted to be part of the secret. They couldn't handle not knowing what it's like.
Well, and Ehud knew this, right? Because he said, hey, I have a secret message for you.
Yeah, so he knew he'd planned this all out, and he knew that he was going to do this. And the amazing part about this that we've talked about back and forth is all of the little parts of this that God used, that Ehud wanted them to, and this was the way for them to get back in favor with God. This was the way for them to get back what was owned to them. And Eglon was not a good-looking man. Let's just say he was rather large. As much so as when he stabbed him, they said they lost the knife in the rolls of fat.
An 18-inch knife he lost into his rolls of fat.
So you can imagine this was kind of a rather large guy, right? Like all of this stuff. And we look at this and we see the power that God worked out in this perfect story. We talked about being left-handed. The way he was able to get in there was because at that time, when they would search you, they would look on your right-hand side to make sure that, your left-hand side, so you couldn't pull, as we're right-handed, pull a sword out. So as they knew that they thought he was safe because they checked and they said there's no sword on him. But because he was left-handed, his sword was on the other side. So all of these things, all of these details, all of this works out that we look at this as Ehud and to see how God brought back his kingdom, brought back so many followers, and brought back this rather grotesque story that Jamie would be sitting right over there rolling her eyes going, how did that pass? Why did you think you could say that? Right? Like all of this disgusting part, but God uses all of this in this beautiful story to redeem his people, to bring his people back to him. And here is Ehud, who is really just willing to do anything because he sees the hurt. He sees his people lost. And he's really the unsung hero because he's not talked about as some great warrior. He used what everybody else viewed as his weakness as truly a strength to grow God.
Yeah. So there's a couple key points from this, and if you read further in Judges and before and after this, there's a few key points. Now, I will say that this is the only place in the Bible that they actually explicitly talk about somebody left-handed, right? And at the time, left-handedness was thought of as less than, right, inferior. But the point here is God uses traits others see as inferior or strange. And as we talked about, in this case, it was a superpower, right? Because the guards were checking the left hip, and he hid this 18-inch long knife in the right hip. The other point, though, from this story is, and this is all throughout Judges, as we had talked about, is that sin has consequences. So every time Israel fell prey to other, and in these cases, foreign worship practices, they fell to another foreign leader, time and time again, right, John? But God still heard their cries. He still heard their voices, and time again, brought somebody as a superhero, a savior. And then the third one, we really hear a message and a point coming from Eglon specifically. And so think about what brought Eglon down in this case. It was his pride and overconfidence. So Eglon dropped his guard while wanting to hear this secret message from a stranger outside the presence of his trusted counselors, right? So a great ruler has humility and exercises discernment and operates in the open with their trusted advisors, which Eglon didn't, right?
Good. And so those are the points that we want you to follow that. But as we start off this series, I want you to be thinking of those little things that we can do to be somebody's hero. Because this quote I found really just, and I'm just going to read it for you here. We can be in our day what the heroes of faith were in their day. But remember, at that time, they didn't know that they were actually heroes. We get to be heroes today. We get to do those small little things. And my question for us as a church is, are we growing in that? Are we leaning in that? Are we spending time realizing that we can be a hero? That I guarantee you, Ehud thousands of years ago, did not look at and go, I bet you there's going to be a church someday that talks about me. He didn't do it for that reason. He did it because it was the right thing to do. He did it because God had called him to do it. And God had called him to use something, his weakness, to be something so much stronger. Are we using those things that God has called us, or those things that the world may perceive us to be weak, to actually be stronger? Are we leaning into those things, that we're really good at, or those things that we even struggle with, or the world tells us that? Are we spending that time being that? Because years from now, people are going to look back and realize those unsung hero moments, those moments in our life that we look at that we don't even really understand. I came across a story about a guy named Ken Wilcox. Ken Wilcox was really, really struggling in life. And he was living in Washington, D.C., and his friends were dying for different reasons, and he was really struggling with a lot of different situations. And one day he was walking on the streets of Washington, D.C., in the busyness of it, and you know, if you've ever been in a big city, you kind of get all pushed kind of around, right? In one of those situations, a bus brushed against his coat. He was so close to the road, and he felt the bus brush against his coat. And he sat there and he said in himself, and he's like, you know what, if I just go a little bit further, this can all end. My world can be over. This can just be done. And nobody's going to even realize, but I don't even exist, and I'm out of this pain. I'm out of this hurt. I'm out of this. And he said he was sitting there, and in that moment of just of self-doubt and of self-pain and self-everything, he said that a woman walked in front of him and walked right in front of him and just did the biggest smile to make sure that he could see the smile. And he said it made no sense at the moment. Like, what are you doing? Like, why is this? Do I know this lady? You know, we've all sat there, right, when somebody smiled at us and we're like, shoot, do I know you? Do I not? Right? Like, and I'm sure it was one of those moments like, what are you doing? And she just sat there and just made sure that, and he said, I could tell she just made sure she wanted to know that she was smiling just at me. And he said it snapped himself out of it where he continued to walk and he continued to realize, I don't even know who that stranger was, but she made a moment to make sure that I knew that I was cared for, that I mattered. And he started to really just kind of find a relationship with God through that. And it's went on to be now that he's a pastor in Washington, D.C. He's turned his entire life around because some random lady went out of her way to turn and do a cheesy smile in front of him. She went out of her way to do something so small, changed the entire trajectory of this guy wanting to step in front of a moving bus to now being a pastor. It's not me, it's him giving the credit to a lady stopping and smiling at him that changed his entire life. And that's truly is what we're talking about being unsung heroes here. To the difference that we can make. It doesn't have to be up here doing a sermon. It doesn't have to be all of these things. It can be the smallest, minute things. And I'm not just saying this. Like, I realize this comes across really awkward as being a pastor, but I was telling Jamie this as we were getting ready for this sermon. And I told her, the sermon series, and I told her, I said, I'll be honest. I believe as a man of God and as a follower and as a Christian, I do more good outside of these walls than I ever do inside of these walls. Those small little things of making sure of having a conversation, making sure you see somebody that's hurting, having that encouragement. And I look back on it and I think of that, the story after story of even this week, of the discouragement of the different things that went on in my own life and went, wow, I really need, like people that stepped up and said comments to me, or even these little things of, I went to the doctor this week for something and the doctor just looked at me and he's like, I need you to know, and he looked me dead in the eye, I need you to know we're going to get this figured out. And that we'll figure it out. And just that constant, I was like, okay. I felt like we're going to be okay. Things are going to be okay. Those little things are truly what makes the unsung hero. The credit goes to all of the other people that are high on a hill and announce all the things they do. But where we make a difference is in all of these small things.
So you don't have to be bitten by a radioactive spider to be a superhero. Is that what you're telling me?
You don't, and I prefer not to be bitten by a radio. Peter Parker lived a horrible life. I don't know that I mean, he did get to kiss her upside down.
Upside down.
That was the only part about Peter Parker's sorry. I'm going off on my superhero tangents.
But again, I mean, we see other heroes, right? And again, when we talk about unsung heroes, we talk about people. I looked up one on while I was going through Google and Facebook, right? Of one of the founding fathers. So who remembers from American history class, Gouverneur Morris? Gouverneur Morris. Not very many hands raised up, right? But he was one of the authors and signers of the Constitution. But he was he had a peg leg. He was from New York State, right? And he was the one who... You said that in such a way of everybody from New York State has a peg leg. Well, anyway, not that there's anything wrong with that. So again, he was somebody that as they were talking about the different drafts of the Constitution, right? I guess George Washington and Jefferson and everybody else were there talking about the different drafts. He pulled them all together, and I didn't even know this. In 1 week, he pulled their drafts together into the Constitution we know today. But the reason they say he's an unsung hero is at the start of the Constitution where it says, "We the people of the United States," that wasn't in the original draft. He modified that in that 1 week. What it originally said is, "We the people of New Hampshire, Massachusetts, Rhode Island," on and on for the 13 colonies. He put that together as "We the people of the United States," right? And how much different would we be today if it was just, "We the people of Rhode Island" and others? So again, I mean, many of us had heard about him in history, but he's an unsung hero by those things that we do every day, right? You don't have to be up with names in lights or all of those other things to be a hero.
So, as we talked about, here are a couple cases of people, because I want you to understand, again, you as a church, you as an individual, you are somebody's hero. And whether you believe it or not, or whether you really know it or not, there's aspects, and I can tell you, and I tell my kids this all the time, I tell people this all the time, there are people that are watching you, that are looking at you, or are looking up to you, and there's traits about you, there's things about you that they want to be a part of, and I've shared that before, and I can go through and I can share that about many people in this room. There's traits about you that I admire so much, and that's what we're using this series for. Over the next couple weeks, and as we celebrate unsung heroes of the Bible that we're going to talk about, but also people just in general, to truly understand that people, yes, we can look at that, and it's because they did what they were called to do. And there's those times that you do what you are called to do, God works in such an amazing ways. I can tell you from my own kids and people like older high schoolers and youth group kids that they've looked up to over the years because of the way that they've done stuff. I can tell you story after story about people in this room, and you would all hate me because I would embarrass you, of story after story of situations that I've watched where you've let your faith show in a really either great situation or a really difficult situation. And my hope for you is that we lean into that, and that this be inspiring, that this sermon series isn't down, depressing, and that this be inspiring to really live every day and understand that people are watching you, and there's people that are looking up to you and that are admiring you. And that's what God wants us to be, is he wants us to lean into those situations. He wants us to understand that when we truly lean into who he made us be, that he is seen, because people want more of that in their life. And that's my hope for us is as we look at that is to really discover what an unsung hero looks like. So if nothing else today, this is my take-home point that I want you to understand. You are someone's hero, and you don't even know it. And that's the beauty of it. There's an old comedian that said, the problem with being somebody's unsung hero, as soon as you tell them about it, you're no longer an unsung hero, because everybody knows about it. But understand that you're someone's hero, and you don't even know it. And people are watching you, and people are seeing how you interact, and people are seeing the way you handle situations. And they're watching. And the hope that we have as Christians, as believers, is that they watch and they see how they do it, and we honor God in that, and in turn, God gets to be seen. Pray with me, won't you? Dear Heavenly Father, we thank you for today. We thank you for this Sunday. We thank you for the reminder of the heroes. And there are some big heroes in the Bible, God, but also there's small heroes. Like Ehud, who was willing to step forward and put himself out there. And I mean, it could have cost him his life. Bringing a sword into the king, could have cost him his life. But God, he followed. And he used something that seems so different to the rest of the world, that seemed like a weakness. And he used it as his strength. God, may we use those things that you've put in our life that we just view as weaknesses, but we can use them as strength. That we can grow, that others may see you. And God, over the next 6 weeks, as we celebrate people that you've used, may we be reminded that we're people's heroes too. And that when we lean into that and we recognize that so many amazing things can be done. We ask that you continue to be with us this week and watch over our week and our struggles, and just be reminded that you're there with us. It's in your name. Amen.